The reason for that is during the process of our statewide work in Columbus, we came across additional evidence that suggested that in Columbus, not only was attendance being scrubbed, but grades were being changed as well without any proper basis. We have also found evidence that indicates an intent to deceive both ODE and the parents of this district. So we have separated that project out. That is part of a special audit that is ongoing. We are working with multiple jurisdictions regarding that, and I can't predict at this time when that will be completed. I also would like to say something, respond to some comments that have been made publicly over the last 3 or 4 months in Columbus that seem to suggest that the school board lacks information to act, that the administration lacks information to act. I'd like to go on record as disagreeing with that. The internal auditor has already produced ample evidence of what has been going on at Columbus Public Schools. The deficiencies in the system are obvious. There's a lack of internal controls. There is really a lack of any accountability. The system, the computer system that has these matters stored in it, doesn't have regular password changes. Something as basic as changing your password every 90 days doesn't happen. The passwords and the credentials have been the same for years over at Columbus Public Schools, and these are straightforward things to change. These are things that are basic management and ought to happen. I'm calling upon the school board to stand up and lead. The time to act is now, and the children of this district need that leadership. It's their education that's at risk here, not the future of any individual person, and not just the district. It's about the kids, and the time to act to repair these things is now. From July 2012, when we started this project, to today, more than 260 auditors have worked on it, spent 10,807 hours, and that's just billable hours, so it doesn't include our management team, the investigators, the design work, or the work of our friends from OSU. The cost has been $443,000, and we looked at 331 individual schools in 137 districts. Most of you have been following the story to a degree. I previously identified in our interim reports 5 districts that were scrubbing: Campbell City School District, the Cleveland Municipal City School District, Columbus, Marion City Schools, and Toledo Public Schools. Today we are identifying an additional 4 in our final report: Canton City School Districts, Cincinnati Public Schools, Northridge Local Schools, and Winton Woods City School District. There were a number of different processes that created issues in each of these. I'm not going to walk through each one individually, although I or the staff will be glad to talk to you about any specific questions you might have. I think the narrative will probably speak for itself. However, those processes did include retroactive withdrawals from attendance, improper reporting for alternative programs, and in a case of Cincinnati, astonishingly, simply deciding to ignore ODE rules because they didn't like them. They didn't think they were well advised, and said as much to us in our interviews. Well, we don't get to decide what rules we obey and what we don't, and Cincinnati Public Schools is named in our current report. An additional goal of this work was to determine the role that ODE had or should have had in this set of issues. And as we consider the Ohio Department of Education, it's important to remember that Ohio has a tradition of local controls of its schools. And that's very important tradition here in Ohio. And any of you who question that can go to a local school board meeting and talk to some of the parents that show up. Local school board meetings are more likely to get citizen attendance than city councils or boards of county commissioners or the other kinds of local governments we have. That tradition of local oversight is built into different parts of the Ohio Revised Code. Some of those things are well-founded, some of them are not, and some of them served to hamper the Ohio Department of Education when it came to supervising these kinds of attendance and data integrity issues. Let me give you a quick example or two. One is something I've talked about a little bit. It's talked about in more detail in the report. The Ohio Department of Education is not allowed to know the names of the kids in the schools in Ohio. They actually contract with an outside vendor who runs a duplicate data warehouse. Now that vendor knows who the kids are and what their names are, and then the vendor creates what's called an SSID. It's an individual number for each student, and that's what goes to ODE. So ODE, when we went in to start looking at the roll-up reports, had no idea who these kids were. They were just a number. This leads to not only duplication costs, because we're paying for two data warehouses, one that has numbers in it, or names in it, and one that's just numbers, but it also creates some other issues. It's difficult for the department to monitor the attendance as relates to individual kids. It's difficult to verify the data. It also leads to a situation where there are duplicate SSIDs. So one kid has more than one number, but how do you know that if you're lacking the individual information? We've asked and suggested that the administration and the General Assembly repeal that law so that ODE is no longer a blind watchdog, but can actually know who the kids are that are in our schools. The widespread nature, though, of the irregularities that we found in certain districts leads me to believe that at the very least ODE provided insufficient oversight on attendance reporting. I'd like to move to our recommendations. You will find